And we're live. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Another episode of Tight Ask Tuesdays. Another special guest.
Yeah, absolutely. Go on, sorry. I cut your horses.
No, it's all good. All good. We've got another special guest for today, which is a depreciation expert. I'll let him talk about himself when he jumps on, introduce himself. He's a character and a half. Probably one of the best in the business as well of what he does in Australia. But I look forward to him, coming on. I think as kids, or not kids, I should say, as when we first started off in this journey, I think he was the very first podcast, for myself, very first property podcast I listened to. So it's amazing to have him on our podcast today. So, but to kick things off, we got to let Adrian do the mindset minute or moment.
Let's jump on.
So what have you got for the viewers?
Mindset minutes / moment. It could go longer than a minute, so I'm not going to promise that it is going to go for a minute. We've got Mr. Mike waiting to jump on, so I'll be quick. Mindset minute really kind of resonates with me today. Is freedom is not achieved by satisfying desire, but by eliminating it. This could be a tongue twister as to who said it. Epictetus was a Greek Stoic philosopher. That's a tongue twister. And he was the one that said this quote some time ago, okay? Now, this week, why I've raised this particular quote is because this week, again, I'll probably say this every week, but I feel like I've uncovered another part of my brain this week. But really, really just talking about this. Now, Frank, everyone else who's business owners, part of being a business owner is you get to learn, as opposed to have to, you get to learn about numbers, okay? Mr. Mortlock, who comes on today, is a numbers expert, self-proclaimed numbers nerd or tax nerd. But just in relation to myself, I've never been good with numbers. I've always had a blocker there in the front of my mind. Whenever I see a spreadsheet, I've never liked it. I quiver at the thought of, numbers are here, numbers are here. Essentially, going back to that quote, every time I go into it, I kept pushing away and kept pushing to my desires. So desires to do other roles in the business, creating videos or, my sales scripts, things that I enjoy more of the business, email marketing, negotiate, whatever it is. And I kept pushing away from the pain of having to nut down, get the budget sorted, which is super important for our business, super important for the trajectory of our business. But it wasn't eliminated. So that issue kept arising. The pain kept arising because I kept pushing towards my desires of staying away from that, staying in my safe spot. Now, really, it wasn't until I woke up one morning, I said, I've got to get this done. Not I got to get this done. I get to get this done. I had to change my worldview on it. And I told myself, this is important. This is what it's going to do for the business. And I pushed forward to that pain. And eventually, after everything, it's now gone. I no longer have that budget sitting on top of my head. Now, this can happen for everything. I'm just referring it to the budget. But for the listeners, talk about working out, talk about university, talk about sleeping in, talk about eating crap, going to work, so on, so on. You've got so much there. By pushing into that desire, by kind of letting your body kind of accept it, you're no longer free. Whereas if you push it to the side and eliminate it, you essentially become free. Maybe longer than a minute. Probably was longer than a minute, but that's okay.
That's all right. I think that was very impactful as well. So it's very true. We don't like to do those things, and when you do, normally they're good for you as well. And you learn something from that. So you learn something, from that exercise, the spreadsheet, the budgets, the things that I don't like to do in the business as well. Like my head in as well, but we have to do it especially when you're starting out. You've got to wear all the hats. That's the tricky part.
Absolutely. So anyway, we've got the big man. I think he's just about in. Let's add him to the stream. There he is.
Hey, Mr. Mike. Good evening.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite, guys. I've been meaning to catch up with both of you in person pre-lockdown, but it's dragged on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it has.
Absolutely.
How are you traveling up there in Sydney?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm in Newcastle at the moment. It's wet and miserable, but we've had quite a lot of sun, so it's not too bad. And we might even get out of lockdown next week. We've been pretty lucky, like a pretty lucky part of the world.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Mike, we've been listening to your podcast, I reckon, Frank, what would you say, 5 years?
Yeah, you can say that.
So small little plug. If anyone has not heard of Mike's podcast, Gear for Growth, amazing podcast. So for us, this is a real pinch yourself moment. But yeah, we've been listening to you for a very long time, and we love the way that you interview, love everything about what you do, really. So
it's very kind of you, Adrian. I think you should relax. I'm not George Clooney or anything. He's got a much better haircut. But when Frank said that I might have been the first property podcast that he listened to, I kind of thought, well, that I did a favor for everyone else. Started the bar pretty low, and then just imagine what you've discovered since then.
It's been an amazing journey since. No. Shall we kick things off, Mike? Again, bit of a plug. What were the posters on the bedroom wall growing up?
Oh, you know what? I've asked so many people this, and someone's asked me once before, but I've never really prepared for this one. But most of my stuff was probably like military stuff. I wanted to be a fighter pilot, so I had pictures of F-111s and F-14s and F-16s and lots of military propaganda, and then maybe a nice sort of Andrew Simons leg hook, something like that.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that.
There you go.
There you go.
You're a big car man, aren't you, Mike?
Oh yeah, I don't think I grew up a car man. As I get older, it becomes more and more intense. Like sitting in front of my computer, I've got little Aston Martin here, just to sort of keep digging it in there. But the exercise really became sort of real for me. Probably like this maybe was about 8 years ago. I kind of thought like I'm doing okay in life. I've got a little bit of an interest in cars. So I went through this exercise of like 3 years, like what would I buy when I'm at that point in time where I've got the money to buy something nice. And then I got to the point where I had enough money to buy something. And then it was like, I spent a couple of years justifying spending money on a sports car. But yeah, I got an old Porsche 4 years ago, and that's just made it worse. Become more into cars and into motorsports and that sort of stuff.
That's awesome.
That's great addiction. I used to be a mechanic, so that's that's something I want to do down the track. So I guess it's very addicting. I guess when you get to go start, finding a hobby that you love and enjoy. But I guess let's get into it, Mike. I want the viewers to, they're new, fresh. They don't know much about you, or they probably haven't heard of you before or your company. So just give them a little introduction of what you do in your business and what MCG is all about.
I've got disgusting product placement right there. Look at that.
Get some of that, I reckon. That's awesome.
So I'm a quantity surveyor, and that's just a question that ruins barbecues for me because people don't know what it is, right? It's not one of those things that you hear about, even in the property space. There's so many real estate agents that don't even know what it is, buyers agents as well. So quantity surveyors are kind of like property valuers, but our expertise is in the construction itself. So a value will provide a market value based on the land, comparable sales, of course the building as well, but they're not the right people to tell you how much it costs to build something. Our whole degree is really based around construction costs. And then quantity surveying sort of deviates from the traditional estimating. Like you might want to know how much something costs to build because you're going for bank finance. My area of expertise is in the tax side of things. So really for property investors, if you own an investment property, you can claim deductions based on the wear and tear of that asset. And that's kind of what I've dedicated my life to. Which sounds sad now that I say it out loud. But I have fun, I enjoy it.
How did you get into that, Mike? Where did that come about?
Yeah, well, obviously I didn't become a fighter pilot, and I thought, what's as exciting and sexy and cool as that? Like, what would be in second place? So it was, fighter pilot, quantity surveyor. I mean, that's obvious, right, Adrian?
Makes sense. No, it makes sense. Should have known.
Well, It's not a great story, really. Like, I couldn't become a fighter pilot because I had health issues, and then I ended up doing year 11 and 12 over 3 years, so a bit of a part-time thing. And there was a crossover between finishing a few subjects, and I just had some spare time, and I thought, oh, like I'm interested in property, so I'll go and study something at TAFE. I ended up becoming a real estate agent for all of about 8 months after I finished my HSC, and realized that like that's an awful job for someone like me who a lot of people don't believe me, but I'm an introvert. I like my own space and company. But I've learned to be able to talk to people over the last decade or so. So I went into real estate. I wasn't good as an introvert, and much more introverted then than I am now. I decided, well, I still like property, but I liked sort of being, doing the calculations. So I studied valuation, and then ended up getting a job in a quantity surveying firm, and switched the degree over. And now I'm here with you on a Tuesday night drinking no alcohol beer. So I've just won the lottery, haven't I?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Amazing. What? When did the business start, Mike?
2011 was when we registered the business, but my business partner and I sort of had other jobs in the beginning. So we were doing it, after hours and on weekends. So I sort of went full time in 2012 and him in 2013.
Okay, beautiful.
It's been a strong trajectory.
I want to kind of like dumb it down for some of the viewers. So a depreciation report is very different to just getting a repair done on the property and then handing that, if you've put a fixtures or fittings, like let's say a dishwasher or an AC, you can get that and you give it to your tax agent and you claim it. But it's a little bit different in the report what you do. Can you kind of just elaborate for the viewers?
Yeah, so when you buy a new asset to put in an investment property, like you're saying, an air conditioner or a hot water system, there's no estimating required. So you can give that to your accountant, and what they will then do is they would figure out what the effective life of the asset is. So the ATO says things like carpet lasts for 8 years. So that sort of helps them to work out what the depreciation rate is. But when you buy an established property or even build a brand new property, you're not going to have a list that says, congratulations, you've got X amount of carpet, you've got X amount of structural bricks or gyprock and that sort of stuff. So that's where we estimate the values of all of those components. We break it up into the little categories that the ATO have specified for us, and then we give that report. And that is basically, it's like a 20-page PDF. So I sometimes joke we're in the PDF business because that's really the only product we sell. And that just shows you what the tax deductions are each financial year for 40 years. So take, for example, you're a property investor on 100 grand a year. That's probably better than average, but it's good for my numbers, right? If we do a tax depreciation schedule and it says in the first year you can claim $11,000 worth of tax deductions, which is probably a little bit higher than average as well, but not far off, then in the eyes of the tax office, you're paying tax on $89,000 rather than $100, because that $11,000 comes off your taxable income. It's a tax deduction like, say, a tradie might claim their tools. Depreciation is really no different to that. And the key benefit is that if you're on 100 grand a year, according to the last time I plugged this into the ATO tax category, tax calculator, you're paying 24 grand a year worth of tax. Whereas if you're on 89 grand a year, you're paying about $20,000 worth of tax. So it's $4,000 saving into your back pocket in that scenario. How does that work? Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And again, I'm just talking to the viewer here, but something along the lines of that, just maybe on an average, don't have to go into your own fees, but fees are what, $4,000, or do you have to pay less for a depreciation schedule? How does that kind of work?
Most residential reports are around the $600 or $700 mark. So what we like to do is we like to identify at least double our fee worth of deductions in the first year alone. So that might be $1,200 or $1,300. So in that scenario, we just want to make sure the report's paying for itself year one, even though it lasts for 40 years. But when you consider that example, the $4,000, that's actually not the tax deductions we're finding back. That's $11,000 of tax deductions, which is $4,000 back in your pocket. So is it worth paying $600 or $700 to get $4,000 back? Yes, and that's just in year one. So it's a pretty bloody good product to sell, because it either provides value, or we say, look, we don't want to sell you a report on this because it's not going to pay for itself, and we've got plenty of people that we can actually help. Or it's going to pay for itself pretty quickly, and our fees tax deductible as well, so that helps the equation as well. So it's a pretty. Sometimes I think the proposition is too positive because people just are suspicious. It's like one of those weird sort of sales seminar. Just sign up today, and this $50,000 thing is suddenly worth $2,999, but it's it's a real thing.
It is. Why don't people know about it? Why so many? We speak to clients, prospects, people every day. And you said it at the start. Why is it that no one knows about this?
Because they're not here tonight on this live. We set it up for people. All they have to do is show up, right?
I told them.
Gosh, I don't know. Look, Adrian, I can't answer the question. I can guess that my 15 years of trying to educate people is wasted. That's a slightly depressing way to look at it. I think more and more people do know about it, but it's one of those things, right? Like I'm quite interested in tax in my little lane, but when it comes to, say, doing our business activity statement or my tax return, I pay money to make it go away because I don't want to know about it. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to do it. Yes, I want to maximize it and ask questions around it, but I'm not going to sort of be talking to the accountant saying, okay, well, you've decided that this structure is the best for the next investment, and I've looked at these different things, and I want to talk to you about CGT exemptions and that sort of stuff. That's not like what your average person is like. So I think it's too niche, it's too nerdy, and it's too scary.
You need to educate for another 15 years, mate. That's the role. That's the goal.
I'll try my best, but I'm already having to mow this pretty short to get rid of the greys.
Mike, I guess for some of the viewers, so if someone here's watching this and never got an investment property, but they haven't claimed the depreciation report, and maybe they've owned it for, let's say, 2 years, or maybe let's say 3 years, and so can they go back and get those deductions?
Yeah, it's a sort of a sad story sometimes, because sometimes there is a limit. I'm happy to share some stats on our research on that, but as it stands, you can back claim 2 financial years worth of deductions. So let's say you're doing your tax return this year and the last 2 you hadn't claimed anything. You can actually say to your accountant, I've got a depreciation schedule, although they should be telling you, can we amend the previous 2 years to recoup those deductions? Now, your accountant will normally charge you a fee to amend your previous year's tax returns, but if that's $4,000 back in your pocket, then paying them, I don't know what it would cost, $500 to amend it, $1,000, it's still worth it, right? What we found in our research is that we don't necessarily know how many people are out there that don't claim deductions, but I looked at 1,000 residential transactions, so 1,000 residential clients, to work out how many people may have waited too long, because we calculate the average number of days from settlement to them contacting us. And what we found is that 6.7% of those 1,000 people wait so long that they actually miss deductions. And the average missed deductions is $20,537. See, I'm not even reading that. I'm looking straight at the camera. Just not to make a liar out of you, Adrian. I'm a numbers guy. So if you extrapolate that figure, that 6.7% across the investor population, and you work out that 20,537 times those people, it's $2.88 billion worth of deductions that are just floating out there in the ether. So that's big biscuits. And I think it's worse than that, because when you look at our stats, I'm only looking at people that have eventually found me. So that 6.7% of people, they got there in the end, right? There's people out there that never contact someone like myself. So I think that the missed deductions are are a lot worse than that. And I always like to joke, well, like you're giving the government more money, and look at some of the things that they do with it. They buy, this is an old reference now, but I don't know if you guys ever remember the Collins class submarines. We bought a bunch of submarines from France or something, and they didn't sink, and the lids wouldn't go on, all that sort of stuff, right? $2 billion worth of investment. Like, do you really want them to have it? Because they're sort of wasting it, you know?
A lot of the time, you're right. And don't we give them enough of it anyway?
Yeah, and I mean, like, here's my thought. Like, if you kind of think, oh, that's a little bit unfair, you know, I want to pay what's reasonable and that sort of stuff. I mean, you are right. You're only paying sort of the tax on your profit and on your income, but you might decide, okay, well, I'm going to take that money and I'm going to give it to a charity that I identify with, right?
Yep.
Because there's probably a lot of things that the government spends money on that you actually disagree with. So if you want to pay the money, don't tip the government. Go and tip a charity that's important to you.
Fair point. That's a fair point. Do you have stats in front of you or in your mind regarding kind of the average deductions that you are actually paying out, or not you're paying out, but that you're putting together for your clients?
Yeah. I've actually got a live dashboard, so we see that changing day on day. So it depends on your time period. But I remember a number very clearly, because when we started the business, our competitors were saying that on average we get between $5,000 and $10,000 worth of deductions. And I was looking at that thinking, like, gosh, that's lazy. And that's not even an average. Like, you mean to say on range we get 5 to 10. So when we started collecting it, right? We did one schedule, we did 2, we did 50, we did 100. It wasn't enough data to go out and launch and go, we've cracked the case. So I had to sit on it and sort of worry that someone was going to take it from me. It just so happens that people in my industry aren't as sort of nerdy and silly as I am. But the first number that we came up with was $9,183, and it depends on the year and the makeup of properties. But that was a sample of 1,000 reports. I looked at it this morning, and it was a tiny little bit higher. But you know, in that sort of 8 to 10 range is fairly typical.
Fairly accurate. Okay, 8 to 10. So people are potentially leaving. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things that do come into play. Potentially leaving 8 to 10K over a 2-year period, 16 grand. Potentially.
In deductions, yeah. And then that sort of depends what they get back into their pocket, but it could, could easily be $5,000-$6,000 that they're just, that is their money that they're not getting.
It's not chump change. It's not chump change at all.
No, I mean, I say numbers like that, and in my head, I've already spent it.
Yeah,
I can think of stuff. Yeah, and you know, like it's mostly boring stuff. You know, like house repairs and that sort of stuff. I talked about the Porsche before, but I don't. I feel like every time I mention that, I need to sort of bring it back just to make sure people don't think I'm a complete wanker. I don't own any expensive stuff. All of my stuff is crap. I've got shoes with holes in them, like.
That banner at the back is nice, Mike. Come on.
What's that, sorry?
That banner at the back is very, very nice. You're selling yourself short.
Yeah, I mean, but I didn't even organise that. So, and I mean, like, I've got stuff in the office here. Like, look at this. Looks expensive. Empty. Bought it for $60 at a furniture store. You know, it's just, I'm just pretending.
It's all a pretend. You're funny.
Well, Mike, so I guess with deductions, I guess people might be listening and say, okay, so it makes sense to go out and buy new properties. But with older established properties, can you still claim deductions? And is there a cutoff date for when you can claim the deductions?
It's a great question, Frank. I feel like you're just underarming them to me. Like you've just, you know what to ask. You must have listened to some of my stuff.
I've been listening to 5 years.
I remember I listened to every episode nearly when I first found your podcast.
Jeez, I feel like there could be a class action coming to sue me for that. All I can do is apologize. Yes, so there's two main buckets of depreciation. There's plant and equipment items, and that's like the loose assets like carpets, ovens, cooktops, hot water systems. And then the other main category is the building structure. So that's things like the timber frame, the gyprock, the concrete, even tiles and cabinetry like in your kitchen. So to be able to claim depreciation on the original building structure, it needs to be built after the 16th of September 1987. Maybe just remember 87. That's a bit easier, right? So if it's built after 87, it means you can claim deductions on the original structure, which is short for it's definitely worthwhile getting a report. Plant and equipment items since 2017, you either needed to buy brand new property to claim them, or you need to install them yourself. So brand new is in most cases better because you've got those plant and equipment items. But what people neglect to realize is that properties that were built pre-87, like in the 50s or 60s, are very frequently renovated. In fact, you don't find that many properties built in the 60s that were just left alone, because it's not good for reval, it's not good for attracting the right tenant, it's not good for your rental return. So if you buy a property built in the 60s that's had a new kitchen or a bathroom or an extension, you can actually claim deductions based on the structural work that the previous owner has done. So when people say depreciation's only for new property, I say bollocks.
And even so, they would have the ability to come to you and say, yep, oh, no, it's actually not worth it. Or yes, actually, this is what you're most likely going to get.
Yeah,
is that right?
big part of what we do. In fact, the last email I sent was someone bought an investment property, had two houses on it. One was old, and they thought the other one looks a little bit newer, but the older one had some improvements as well. And then there was a newer shed. So yeah, that's a big part of what we do is analyzing whether it's worthwhile to have a schedule, because that's the first step. Like, I don't want to charge someone a fee if I'm not going to do better than what we're charging them. Otherwise, what's the point, right? So yes, we do that analysis. So all day, every day, people are sending us through properties where we're looking at it and we're saying, yes, this one stacks because it's had an extension, or no, this one doesn't look very good. What's your time horizon? Because, you know, a report might be worthwhile if you know you're going to rent it out for 10 years or something like that. So yeah, we absolutely do that.
Okay. And so let's just say that someone goes to engage you. They come to you, they say, yep, Mike, MCG, I want to get a depreciation schedule. What's the process from, I guess, there to when they can get that refund?
Yeah.
That rebate?
So the first thing I like to say is congratulations, because buying an investment property is a bloody good effort. It's difficult. It requires discipline and saving, and can be a nervous leap for some people. And I think that's something that people in my position can forget when we're doing thousands and thousands of depreciation schedules. They mean a lot to people. So that's something that I drill into the whole team, is that it's a big deal. So we owe it to people to do the best possible job. So that's first. Then we say, what did you buy? Give us some information about it. Often if there's like a realestate.com listing, we can look at it. We'll ask them when they bought it, whether they've made any improvements to it, whether they've lived in it. All these sorts of things make a difference on the report and the deductions. Once we sort of get the go-ahead from them, we basically just send them a list of the things that we need to get from them, such as the full legal name for the report, any improvements they've done, you know, what's done, when was it done, and the cost. And then we'll do an inspection, which we organise directly with the property manager or tenant. And once we've done that and we've got the report information, we send it out to the client and often their accountant as well, because the accountant may have some questions or back and forth. We do a little one-pager for the accountant because they like certain parts of the report, whereas the client, I want to make it clear like how to read it properly. So we send a video saying, this is a bloody big document, because the accountants like all their little bells and whistles in it, but here's actually how to see what your deductions are. So once you've got that, you just take that to your accountant, and when you're doing your tax return, they'll plug in all those relevant figures, and then it depends on whether the ATO servers are online or not, which is a thing. And then it could be, you know, a week and you've got the money back in your pocket.
Quick turnaround.
Beautiful. So I guess, Mike, as well, with your company, do you just service certain states?
No, we service everywhere. So there are some states where we don't have an office premises like the Northern Territory, for example. But, I've done 2 McDonald's stores in Darwin. I've been there before to do that. We don't necessarily target the Northern Territory, for example. We'll get there at one point, but Australia's a bloody big place, and it took starting a quantity surveying firm to realize that. You talked, I think you were talking in your intro, Adrian, about doing all the stuff in the beginning. Well, when we started, I was doing, all of the inspections and all of the reports, and that's a lot of travel and hotel rooms and very unglamorous stuff that makes me appreciate being able to just sit here and have fun with you guys and call that a job. Yeah, we pretty much do all of Australia.
Wonderful. And I guess for the viewers, and for other investors, once we get a report, what would happen? I guess, do we have to pay that deduction back if we sell the property, or can we keep those savings?
Yeah, that's a question that I get a lot, and I was talking to a lady who has a tax training business for accountants, and she's agreed to do a little explainer video that's talking about this exact thing. Wonderful. So I'll have to remember, and I'll chuck it on the group. A lot of people heckle at me at the end of presentations, saying like, "What's all this nonsense about depreciation being good gear when you've just only got to pay it back at the end?" And that's kind of a less polite way of asking the question that you did, Frank. So what actually happens with tax depreciation, we talked about the 2 different categories, so the plant and equipment and then the structure. Plant and equipment doesn't really, and there's some caveats to this, but it doesn't really impact the capital gains tax that we're talking about having to pay back. But let's say you buy a property for $100,000. I don't know, we're going some mining town that's just about to boom, You bought it for $100,000. They strike oil or lithium or whatever they're looking for. You sell it 2 years later for $200,000, right? So in that instance, you've made $100,000 capital gain. But in that period, let's say those, 2 years, if you're claiming $5,000 a year worth of deductions on the building structure, then that's a total of $10,000 worth of deductions on the structural component. So what that means is that it affects the initial cost base. So it'll actually go from 100 to 80. So that means your capital gain will be 120 instead of 100. So it's added to the capital gain. So people incorrectly sort of form the opinion, okay, well, I've claimed my $10,000 worth of deductions, but I've got to pay it back in capital gains tax. And the answer is no, because if you hold a property for 12 months or more, you get the 50% CGT exemption, right? So straight away it's cut in half. Then it's only taxed at your marginal rate. So that $10,000 goes to $5,000, and then it might go to, say, 37% of $5,000. Now, I'm a numbers guy.
Do the maths. Come on, Mike.
No, I'm not gifted. People ask me 1 + 2, and I open an Excel spreadsheet. Like that's where I'm at. I just don't think anymore. The fingers, they just do it. But of course, I haven't done it for this example, so I've made a lie of myself. But yeah, so the point is, like, you're not paying it all back. You cut it in half after a year, and then it's down to your marginal rate. But what people, I think, maybe miss that's even more important is the time value of money. So in this example, 2 years is not a long time, but for most people that are investing in property, they've got a longer time horizon. If you buy a property in your 30s and your 40s and you sell it when you're 60 to retire or whatever, then you might have 20 or 30 years. Now, the value of $1 today compared to in 20 or 30 years is significantly different. And what people, I think, need to understand when they're investing in property, if they're getting into it, if they're fairly new to it, is really the hardest time cash flow wise to hold an investment property is right at the beginning, because over time your mortgage may go down if you're paying principal. Your rents will hopefully go up. So it actually gets a little bit easier. So to be able to have those deductions to help your cash flow at the beginning, they're worth more to you then than later on down the track anyway. That's probably a lot bigger answer than you hoped for, Frank. I'm sorry, but I like to sort of give my best sales pitch to this, because I just think, like, fair enough, if you want to sort of have any criticism of depreciation, I'm open for it, but this is not founded in good quality sort of financial facts.
So essentially, sorry, Frank, go.
No, go for it.
No, I was going to say, essentially what you're saying is just get the depreciation. It really is a win-win for everyone, really, except for the taxman. But
and if you're worried, you can talk to your accountant about it. You know, you can just say, look, what are the implications here? Like plenty of times. Oh, hi, Christian. Thank you for those 5 claps. Hopefully it's out of 5. You can talk to your accountant. I mean, often when we sort of are doing an analysis, if we see a property that doesn't stack, sometimes we might actually say, look, we don't see this as being a great candidate, but we're seeing maybe $800 a year worth of deductions. Go and talk to your accountant whether it's worth, in your circumstances, paying $600 or $700 for $800 a year worth of deductions. And if they say yes, cool, right? The accountant is certified, yes, you are better off. If they say no, we're like, we'll help you on the next one, right? We want to be the good guys and say, look, if it's not working for you, it's not working for you. We'll help you on the next one.
Sure.
Pretty cool. I like it. I like the way you explained it. I've never actually heard you explain it. I've listened to almost all your podcasts. That's very cool.
I try not to talk about tax. You know, most of my podcasts are interviewing people. I think people can go listening for a couple of years and just sort of wonder, what does that bloke even do?
Undercover. I'm just conscious of time, so I don't want to keep you here all night. If it was up to me, I would. Now that people have this information, right? Not advice for you, but would you go out and say, go and purchase a property purely on the depreciation on that, or what they could potentially retain or get back?
Yeah, great question. No, a resounding no. As much as I love tax depreciation, people have called me a couple of times and they said, Mike, what should I buy for the best possible tax depreciation deductions? And I say, strap yourself in. It's a unit in a complex of, say, 1,600. It's got 4 gyms. It's got 2 cinemas. It's got 8 levels of car parking. It's got 4 swimming pools. It's got everything. And they say, oh, like, wouldn't the strata fees be high? I'm like, yeah. And they say, oh, wouldn't that be like not going up in value because it's competing with so many other apartments? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, oh, that sounds terrible. I'm like, yeah, but just remember the question that you asked me. What should I buy if I want the highest tax deductions? And that is almost like the nightmarish scenario of an investment property for these people, right? So that's why I say, like, depreciation's a bonus. It's not a strategy. You think about the 1987 cutoff date for the building structure. I mean, I bought a property built in 1985. You know, it hurt me a little bit, right? Because I'm like, oh, it's so close. But the investment it drove the decision, not the deductions. And I would encourage anybody to consider depreciation merely as a bonus. And so many people go into an accountant's office and saying, I need to buy an investment property. And the accountant says, okay, cool. Why? And they say, I'm paying too much tax. And then that's it. Not like, do you want it to go up? Like, have you thought about where it's going to be and maybe what the economic drivers are or what the vacancy rates are? No, it's just like, I hate tax. And we all hate the stick, right? We all hate doing things that are painful. But yeah, I think it's a very silly strategy.
That's good advice from the man himself. So Surveyor as well. So, which is one of his bread and butter. I guess, Mike. If someone was going to do a renovation and they're listening to this, I guess what's some of the best materials or fixtures and fittings you want to put in there to, I guess, claim the maximum depreciation?
Yeah, this is another one of those sort of weird questions because it's like, overcapitalize, right? Because that's the only time it's positive, because the more you spend, the more you can depreciate. But that's obviously not hi John, Yes, he's plugged my other podcast, which we've just launched, Suburb Trolls. Check it out in all good bookstores. Yeah, so when it comes to renovations, like the more you spend, the better it is for deductions, right? But that's not possibly the best strategy for maximizing your market value and that sort of stuff. But there are little tips and tricks that you can do to maximize your return. So, for example, we talked about the two buckets of depreciation, say the plant and equipment and then the structural stuff. Carpet's considered plant and equipment, whereas tiles is considered part of the structure. Now, all the structure in a residential property is going to depreciate at 2.5% of its value each financial year. But with carpet, it'll actually depreciate at 25% in its first year. And there's a couple of asterisks about what happens to it over time, but it's 25 times better it's 10 times better for deductions to put carpet in an investment property than it is tiles. Now, you might kind of think, oh, well, I don't really want, tiles in that area, and I probably, or carpet in that area, and I probably wouldn't put carpet in the kitchen, right? But if you don't really care and you're thinking, oh, would I put in the bedrooms tiles or carpet? Carpet's a better choice for the deductions, absolutely.
Amazing.
Golden nugget, I think, for some of the viewers for sure.
Absolutely, people can view that. Mike, it's been a pleasure. We could go on all night. I don't want to do that to you. I don't want to bore you. Well, bore you. I reckon you could talk for a while on this. But amazing. Thank you so much. And we spoke about a few things here. We spoke about, I guess, people are leaving money on the table. I think that's a massive thing here. And what you can actually do with depreciation. That's exciting.
Yeah, I think so. Hopefully I've provided some value, and if anyone's got any questions, just ping me. I'm easy to find on socials. And yeah, happy to hang around in the group as well. If people have got questions over time, just tag me in something, and looking forward to tagging along with you guys, and congrats on the group and the success to date, and thanks for having me. It was good fun.
Thank you so much, Mike. How can people get in contact with you? I'll post it up in here.
What do we got? Hi, Gina. Love your work. Lovely photo too. I'm in the group. So if you just search my name and my company MCG, it's just mcgqs.com.au. That was a bit clunky. And yeah, you can find me through there. That's probably the easiest way.
I'll pop it up in here. But thank you again, Mike. We've been lifelong listeners. We even pinch ourselves moment, hey Frank, having Mike on the show.
I guess if the viewers are watching, check out Mike's podcast, Geared for Growth. Highly recommend it.
We're just plugging you away.
Love your work, guys. Checks in the
mail. All right, Mike, we'll keep in touch. Hopefully we come down there and have a beer with you.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Take care. Thanks again.
Stay safe, Mike.